Mountain Book Festival, which is part of Kendal Mountain Festival. We are delighted to have Cotswold Outdoor as our official book partner. Thank you so much for joining us today, this morning. I am very, very excited. It feels like a real privilege always to sit on stage with an author and to talk about their work. And basically, I get to be the nosy person who asks all the questions. But I'll make sure that there's a little bit time at the end for you to ask questions as well. So cue them up in your minds. There will also be a book signing immediately after this event, just over there, so you don't need to go any further. But if you want to talk to Beatrice, and then come back and buy a book later, then the bookshop, the festival bookshop is outside in the Garden of Brewery Arts, so you can browse the other titles and authors that are speaking here this weekend. The usual stuff, please make sure your phone is on silent. By all means, take photos and put them on the old socials if you fancy that kind of thing. I don't mind that, just don't let it ring. And if you've got any concerns at all, then the volunteers in the room are here to assist you, point you to the toilets or the exits or whatever else that you need. I'm Mary-Ann Ochota. I'm a broadcaster and author. I write about the historic landscape, and I'm a big fan of walking up hills as well. And this morning, I'm joined by BeatriceSearle, artist and stonemason. She has written this really fantastically beguiling book, Stone Will Answer. It's the tale of, I think, probably fair to say, a strange journey. It's partly about the art and craft of stonemasonry. It's partly about Beatrice's fascination with the mysterious ancient tradition of footprint stones. And it's in large part a personal, visceral and literal journey, taking a footprint stone on foot from Orkney across southern Norway to Nidaros Cathedral in Trondheim. Beatrice, tell me about the history of footprint stones. Tell me about what these stones are, before we talk about your stone and your journey.
Stones with carved footprints, like the ones that I made and carried, historically have had really important functions and profound effects on the people that used them. So kings and peoples of old would stand in carved prints in order to make a binding union with the land or to pledge an allegiance there, and that action was equaled by the steadfastness of the stone. Greco-Roman travelers are known to have carved prints into stone before they undertook a journey in order to appeal to the very enigmatic god of the return, Ridiculous, for protective rights on their travels. And the stone that for me was the kind of capstone on this whole idea was a stone said to have been sailed by Magnus, who's Orkney's Norse earl and patron saint, across the Pentland Firth, and the stone is said to still bear his footprints. Pentland Firth is that very treacherous stretch of water between the Scottish mainland and Orkney, and you can still see it today. It's housed in St Mary's Church in Berwick in South Ronaldsay. And
it's St Magnus's Cathedral in Kirkwall, isn't it, in Orkney as well? So this is St Magnus's land in some ways.
Yeah. So when I decided to make a footprint stone of my own, but one that would be a roving connecting stone, a kind of bedrock on the move, it was in order that I could offer it to people that I met on the journey so that they might step into some of those connections and feelings, and felt that there were resonances in making an action like that that would be strongly meaningful for people today, and were certainly meaningful for me.
And just to help you picture what on earth she's talking about, we've got a photo of the stone that you carved. So you're there. We can see it there, and they can see it here.
Right.
So tell us about the stonemasonry involved in carving into stone like this.
This is St Magnus's boat, it's called. Incidentally, my stone is called the Orkney boat as a nod to this one, and because, as with any boat, we were resolving a balance of weight and buoyancy and forward motion. So that's the reason for the naming. This is a really very, very hard windstone, surrounded by the action of the sea. And we're talking sort of kind of Dalriata, Scotia Island sort of time, so 5th century AD possibly. In terms of working methods, probably nothing like what I'm used to as a cathedral stonemason. The development of tungsten carbide in our chisels has changed everything.
But the principle, the essence behind the myth around this story is that Magnus steps onto a stone and, a bit like a surfboard, it takes him across the Pentland Firth to where he should be.
Yeah, so there's, the myth relating to this.
Or a stand-up paddleboard, if you will, maybe.
Yeah, the myth relating to this stone is that Magnus hastened into the sea, and when I wrote the book, as you'll know, it strays into imaginative flights quite a lot. I'm completely convinced of the power of storytelling and the necessity of storytelling for making sense of our own lives, and I loved writing those myths. Some of them are myths that are well known and reimagined, and the Magnus story is one of them. So people are aware that Magnus hastened into the Pentland Firth and was helped across by a stone which still bears his footprints. I tried to imagine what it was that was pursuing him, what made him so bold, what led him to put his faith in a stone. So, perhaps he was swimming already and the stone came from the depths to meet his flailing feet. Perhaps he was standing on a beach stone thinking about what a sorry lack of boats there were, and it softened and spun him off across the Firth. That's all the kind of thing I really love to imagine and write about.
So you're a cathedral stonemason in Lincoln Cathedral. Mm. You're learning your craft.
Yeah.
You learn about these footprint stones. You can find footprint stones in Tintagel in Cornwall. You can find one at the top of Dunnad in Argyll, which you can still put your foot in. If you're a size 6, you get to be the king of the Gales, if you can stick your foot in there. What compels you? So I find footprint stones totally compelling, but Beatrice, I didn't then go, what I need to do is create my own footprint stone and go on a madcap 500-mile journey to Norway. How did you make one leap to the next? What compelled you to begin this journey?
So the historical facts are what we've discussed. In terms of why I felt so motivated to make the action that I did, it was first conceived as an art project. That's probably quite important to say, and it never ceased to be an art project, but it became much more than that. It became actually me simply living my own life as purely and fiercely as I probably always should have. I think many of the reasons why I undertook the journey I didn't know before even writing the book. In fact, there's not a rational explanation that explains why the difficulty of the journey was worth it, but I think of it, and I say this in the book, as being no more complex or intuitive than an act of faith. Actually, I believed very strongly that the action I was making had the power to transform my life, and I maybe couldn't have articulated quite why, but I think so much the better if we don't know those things before we undertake a quest, because there's more to discover along the way. I think when I offered the stone to people, it was in the hope of extending that power. I think I have more in common with the people compelled to move or to raise stones, of which I'm not the first by a long, long way. More in common with the stone movers of the world than I do with the stonemasons of the world, really. In the end, I'm not a brilliant stonemason, not because I don't have the skill, but because of my feeling about stone and the boundless freedom that I appreciate in stone. And I think, like all those stone movers of the world, I believe in the power of stone to restore bonds of belonging and hearth. So yeah, I've said actually quite a lot of rambly stuff there, haven't I?
Let's just, I think we've got a photograph of the way you actually transported the stone. So you got on an actual boat with your Orkney boat.
Sailing boat, yeah.
To go from Orkney to...
Bergen on the west coast.
Okay. And then you begin your journey on foot.
Yeah.
Following a pilgrim route.
Yeah, ancient pilgrim path, 500 miles from Oslo to Nidaros Cathedral in Trondheim.
Tell us a little bit about the setup, like the actual logistics of this adventure.
Okay.
And then we'll talk more about the emotional compulsions.
Yeah. As you can see from the photograph, I pull the stone on a trailer, which is a modified sack barrow, with the help of a climbing harness. The stone is ratchet strapped to the boards. That version of the trailer is version number 3. In the quite a large part of the story is about the trailer troubles that I had. The wheels literally fell off a few times. And the terrain, so it's called the Pilgrim's Leden, the Pilgrim's Road, or the Gudbrandsdalen Path. Every king of Norway walked this path historically. It's the most direct route to Nidaros Cathedral. It's well waymarked. It's walked by 100 or so pilgrims each year. It's a mixture of mountain crossing. It crosses the Dovrefell range at their narrowest point, where they run east to west across north and south Norway. The terrain is a mixture of dirt path and forest and main roads. I wasn't able to follow the pilgrim path as a walker would be, as a usual pilgrim would be, because sometimes I had to swap the pilgrim route for safer roads or mechanics' yards. Yes, 500 miles, I think I said
And
that.
you're camping, you're carrying your camp
camping.
kit with you.
Yeah, you can see on that, in that photo, the green bag's full of food. My camera tripod's there, and what you can't see is that the tent and the water is stored in the kind of triangle space underneath the trailer. The trailer, I refer to her as Mary-Ann because she has the word, it was just a name that stuck, but she has the word faithful of the tool brand embossed on her frame. And I still have Mary-Ann.
Oh, do you?
Yeah.
Okay, I've got to make a note about that, because one of my last questions is what happens to the stone? And the fact that you've kept your trailer, I find deeply intriguing, having read your book, because I feel like I might have thrown it into the sea. Just me. Not Mary-Ann Faithful, obviously. The other kind. Okay. The story is one of an incredibly difficult journey, physically. I mean, this bit, I kind of thought, oh, that looks all right. And a 40-kilo stone, I mean, that's not that heavy, is it? It's most of you, Beatrice, right?
Most.
I mean, if we cut your head off, that would be about, yeah. And plus the trailer,
Yeah.
plus your kit,
Yeah.
effectively man-hauling, but with slightly unreliable wheels. That's a big deal. I mean, physically, that is a serious undertaking. How hard physically was it?
It was really, really physically hard. Funnily enough, the difficulty of it has paled a lot. I have to remind myself that it was physically hard. It was never not worth it. It was the adventure of my life. I tried many times actually to stop. Well, I think I tried many times to stop for my sake or for the sake of my walking partner when something really horrendously dangerous had occurred or I was injured, and I simply found that I couldn't because the horror vanished and we walked another day and another day. I also feel very much that as a sculptor and a handler of stones, physical effort, physicality was my way into understanding what this journey was. I'm not surprised, looking back, about the movement that I made from the emotional to the physical, because I am a sculptor, and so for me to make work is to give physical presence to an idea. And I was doing the work of a sculptor throughout, in a way. I was handling sensitively my stone, considering size and weight and momentum throughout. So the work, on one sense, I did my sculptural work in an afternoon, the carving of the footprints, and in another sense, I was really never very far from the work of a sculptor in my moving with it.
Okay. There are, as a reader, I felt that there were 3 people on your journey with you. Or there was you, there was your walking partner, who you refer to as T.
Yes.
And there's the stone itself, which carries this enormous presence in the book. And I so strongly got the sense that you were in some kind of beautiful but kind of wicked relationship. You couldn't leave it. There's one point where at night you get up and stand in the footprints of the stone. There's another point where you've had to leave it on the side of the trail. And Beatrice gets out of her tent, walks up this trail in the dark to go and check that the stone is okay. And I was like, the stone's fine, Beatrice, go back to bed. And I felt nervous for you, this kind of strange, kind of magical pull and tension. Maybe let's have a reading about a difficult point and that compulsion to continue.
Yeah, okay. So the context for this reading is that we've had a horrendously difficult day. I've had a really frightening kind of episode of back spasming as I'm walking along a tiny spit of land along a main road. The stone has fallen down a railway embankment and we've dragged it back up. The trailer is broken and there's no hope of repair on the horizon. And that night I say, enough is enough, I think we're stopping, I'm calling it. And then this is what happens the next morning. The heat of the rising sun wakes me. Under blue sky, I let down the tent as swiftly and naturally as always, folding and rolling the whole thing together into a thick barrel for the stuff sack, while T puts water to boil in a tin pot on the stove. We eat breakfast at our outpost overlooking the Pilgrim Centre and the river. T cools the stove, washes and empties our cookware and packs the rucksack. Neither of us mention the conversation we had as we were falling asleep. It is not willful avoidance that prevents us. It just does not seem relevant today to revive that defeat and words spoken in shock. I feel no trace of the previous day's fatigue or injury. The morning has brought clear sky and we still have pear juice to drink. There will be hospitality and possibility down at the Pilgrim Centre. There is hope, far too much hope to disavow. I cannot stop. I know this to be true because I made my best effort last night. When I sounded the words, I believed I was insisting we stop, and yet the new day knows nothing about it. It is not stubbornness, I think. It is inertia in action. It is physics. Newton's first law of motion is also Newton's first law of inertia, the natural tendency of objects to resist change to their state of motion. It was stones that gave the first clues to the way that weight could be set in action and would be all but impossible to halt once their will to move was inflamed. Beware anyone who gets a heavy thing moving. They will be dedicated to it long after they think of stopping. Stone, it occurs to me, is generally not ambulatory. That is, it is not able to move under its own power. Even erratics, the best known of moved stones, ride on the sleek backs of glaciers. Constantly on the move, but never of its own accord, a stone is only ever done by, acted on, and its agents of change, its agitators, are perfectly evolved together to keep it mobile. What more everyday thing for this rock of mine, then? I like to think that the stone is open to being moved by me too. It is true that the stone did not get a say in its bearer, but having always been reliant on external forces to carry it, I have to assume that I'm not greatly disrupting the natural order of things. United in resistance against any change to our motion, which of us is the mover and which of us the moved? I certainly used to know. What were once clearly defined roles now seem to be indistinguishable. The stone to which I have given momentum seems to be moving me. So much moved am I, in fact, so attached, that it seems that my stone could move me down a potential death drop and we would still go on moving together. This makes such sense that the thought hardly feels like a discovery. Rather, it is so obvious, so open as to be undeniable, that there is nothing more natural for me than to be moving with my Orcadian stone. I might have known it all along. I laugh the laugh I could not find yesterday at the stone where it rests. Laugh at this simple truth and the absurdity of denying it. How could this come to an end? I do not believe that it could. A founding stone on a journey is as essential as everything I pull with us. The shelter and water in the wedge between the boards, the food and the maps fastened behind the handles, the stone on top. Alongside the shelter and sustenance, the stone is no less vital. It is constant in its size, its weight, and its necessity. So fundamental for my life now, and yet so dangerous. I am endangered by my stone of crucial support, and yet today I do not feel any fear.
I mean, we're at the Kendal Mountain Festival. There are lots of books about journeys, lots of books about adventure. The thing that's so compelling about the book you've written, Beatrice, and the journey you describe is that it's not quite a journey about moving forward, or it's not only a journey about moving forwards. It's not only a journey about perhaps running from. It's a journey of resisting movement. That for the stone sometimes doesn't want to move, and the idea that when you're sort of physically engaging with the stone by standing in the footprints, or you present it at a place for other people to take off their shoes and stand in the footprints as well, it has to be stationary.
Yeah.
Was that the kind of the poetry of that? The fact that you found this stone on a beach in Orkney, it's been washed in by the sea, it's been smoothed by the sea, then you shape it and take it on its next bit of journey. Was the kind of poetry the thing that compelled you to kind of come up with the project in the first place?
Yeah, very definitely. I also I felt long before I knew how to make it real that it was very important for me to find a balance between belonging in a place in my own kind of beloved stony territory, which happens to be for a short time this bit of Orkney, and the freedom to move, and to be able to distinguish between the weight that ceases movement and the weight that allows perfect freedom and health and forward momentum. And I keep harking back to boats, but boats are a good example of this. The way that they're weighted down allows them their buoyancy and their forward motion, which is the reason that I was interested in boats to begin with.
The idea of kind of ballast stones,
yes,
for example.
Ballast stone. You can think of the Orkney boat as being my own personal ballast stone. And it was the juxtaposition of the moving forward, which raised all sorts of things for me as I was walking, and this audience probably know that well, the way that happens. The stone at the end of the day, and I didn't realize what was in the journey for me when I set out. I thought that I would be a generous carrier of a footprint stone and that other people would do their thing in it.
So you would go from A to B to C to D.
Yeah, like
ta-da, here's this
touring
artistic stone,
yeah,
stand in it, have a moment. Okay.
Yeah, and it becomes so clear really very quickly. Well, because people at the beginning they can't understand it. There's not a lot of there's not a lot of engagement, and I realise that there's still something in it worth it for me. There's reason to keep going, and that's the first little indication that actually perhaps it's my journey, and perhaps it would be comfy, sure, if people did the work for me. But I'm the one that needs to stand in it at the end of every moving day, and I do. And I'm the one that needs the hold fast, the stable hold fast of the stone, from which I can move mentally as well. it's a book that jumps about. It moves through different times and different worlds. It jumps about my life, and that's exactly what goes on in my head during my walk. I managed to draw together into the stone all these threads of my life, which provide me a lot of necessary answers.
Now, there's one aspect where you initially come up with the plan for this journey that you're going to do it on your own.
Yeah.
And then you don't. Just tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah.
How much you had to flex to the realities of the journey you wanted to undertake.
Yeah. I intended to do it alone. And I encountered some opposition from my family about that. And it wasn't quite true.
Wait, unpack that. Why?
The dangers of it were, I think everyone was concerned that I might end up crushed beneath my own beloved rock at the foot of a gully, and I had to admit that was a possibility.
Yes.
Yeah.
That comes across every now and then in the book.
So, yeah, and it wasn't quite true that there was no one available or willing to help me also. So when I accepted to have a walking partner, it was on the understanding that it would only ever be me to carry the stone. And on day one, it becomes clear that that's not going to be possible. And I'm not very easily reconciled to that on the journey. Apart from our different sensitivities to the handling of the stone and our different passions for it, because no one could have had the connection with it that I did. So it would be unfair to expect that. I also didn't want that. I needn't have worried, I think, about whether there was another person helping to do the physical work, because that kind of cathartic and introspective work made me alone anyway, and that was exactly as it needed to be, so that was fine. But I'm also very glad, looking back, that I wasn't alone when I didn't need to be, because I think I once might have been attracted by a kind of needless loneliness. In actual fact, I'm very grateful to my walking partner for everything that he did in Norway, and I really hope that the book honours his part, because I meant it to, though things are difficult, and I am difficult. And
there's one bit where you describe kind of resorting to a, quote, self-preserving apathy, because everything, the circumstances and the people around you going, Beatrice, we need to stop, and you're like, no. Me and the stone are continuing, and I that resonated. It just felt so powerful.
I do. There are a couple of moments when I think I absolutely could do this alone. If it all falls apart, if he leaves, I know how I will continue. I will be slower, but I'm not afraid of being alone with this stone. But I open my heart a lot as the journey goes on, because it's really, I think it becomes clear that encounters with people really unlock for me what it is that I'm doing. Also that many of the pilgrims and walkers that I meet, they understand what it is that I'm doing, some of them long before I do, because we're all carrying weight on that. We're all carrying something, we're all resolving some kind of weight on that path, and mine just happens to be very obvious, visible,
literal,
and clanking behind me. Yeah.
So that leads us to this idea of kind of what is a pilgrim, what is a pilgrimage, what makes this not the kind of, I don't know, lightweight round island with a fridge kind of journey. Like I'm taking this kind of bonkers thing just on a jaunt. This is not a jaunt. This is much more serious and weighty than that. So tell me about your thoughts around the idea of pilgrimage and whether you are a pilgrim.
I was really resistant to the pilgrim title for a long time. I chose to walk a pilgrim path. Well, I chose to walk this path that happened to be a pilgrim path. I didn't have a religious intent, and I was afraid that people would make that connection. My reasons for choosing that path were, may I just say those quickly, that there are very strong historical and cultural links between Orkney and Norway. Orkney is very proud of its kind of Norse heritage. And at the point that I sent in my proposal for this project, it was actually the year of the Magnus 900 celebration, so it was a very lucky moment to have appealed to the Orkney Arts Council.
So this is a proposal to get some funding to help you do the journey. Yeah.
Yeah, so a project that began with St Magnus's stone boat was kind of suited to that programme. But in actual fact, I was a cathedral mason at Lincoln at the time, and there was a stonemason's carver signature on their finished stones. It's been a practice since medieval times. It's called a banker mark. It's cut in very quickly. And there's a banker mark in the medieval masonry of Lincoln that also occurs in the medieval masonry of Nidaros Cathedral. So it was thought that this was the evidence for a travelling mason, and stonemasonry was an itinerant craft once, as many of these crafts were, who had worked on both Lincoln and Nidaros Cathedral. So in some ways, I wanted to finish at Lincoln's kind of sister cathedral and follow in the footsteps of our archetype mason. So those are the reasons that I was on this path. And yet, everybody called me pilgrim without hesitation, and I was uncomfortable with it. From the beginning, I'd done quite a lot of academic reading about pilgrimage before setting off, and I thought that I understood that in order to truly be a pilgrimage, one had to leave home to experience a kind of disorientation and uncertain state, to be changed, to return home. And that was exactly the opposite of what I intended to do, which was to carry for myself, to explore my close and constant proximity with a stone, to be always in contact with it, to make the stone to belong to the stone and not to be separate from it. So that seemed to me to be directly opposite to what pilgrimage required. And not long after this photograph was taken, we arrived at a very deeply religious place called Foxtagoo, where they called me pilgrim, welcomed me so warmly that my confusion meant I sort of had to gently try to have it out with them. So I asked them why it was that they hadn't batted an eyelid at the arrival of this mad girl with a rock on wheels, coming without a belief in God, but they'd asked me to really be a part of life there. And I'd been really deeply touched by the place, so I felt it was the moment to be honest about my non-pilgrim status. They told me there that what I was doing, carrying a stone across the Dovrefell Mountains, was an action I had in common with centuries of people who'd walked over Dovrefell with stones or heaviness to lay down in front of the cathedral. And what I was doing was not so very unusual. Resonated with them that I was absolutely a pilgrim if I allowed the long road to bring about long thoughts, and if I was open-hearted and available enough to be changed by them. And it's one of my very favourite points in the journey, and one of the most important, the way that they connect me so strongly with history and humanity in that way. And being able to think of my journey as a pilgrimage from that moment forward really unlocked it for me.
Should we have another short reading?
Yes. This little bit takes place in that deeply religious place that I just described, but before I have that conversation and willingly take on the role of pilgrim. But this might give you a sense of the kind of peace and humility and understanding that I encounter there, which makes me open to having the pilgrimage conversation. They've just asked if I will take them to my stone. It's kind of dusk time. We go outside to it, to the river and to Jürgen's drying bridge, now barred with ladders. And while I position the Orkney boat to look west towards low mountains, marbling to a lustrous blue in the fading light, they take off their shoes and are all waiting when I turn around. One by one they stand, wrapped by slopes as if in the wall of an ear. Each rocky corrie inclines like a bent spoon edge to witness the standings, spilling snow and silence. Lauritz stands last and longest. We see only the stern back of him, but his posture reveals that his chin is raised and his hands clasped softly in front of him. Something in his bearing tells me he is moved as he looks over his land and beyond, from a piece of new ground that has come to him from the other side of the North Sea. Wreathed by mountains, he looks over familiar land, land he gives his labour to every day, land which is given back to him and generations of his family before him. I wonder if it seems absurd to someone like him, whose foundations have been unshaken for 1,100 years, that I have brought here a rock of longing from an archipelago I hardly belong to at all. Or whether that matters so very little, and instead he might recognise the intimacy and affinity we share with our pieces of land, regardless of their size, our history, the timing of our discoveries, or our idealism. I remember how I had once been preoccupied with the kinds of words that were uttered from ancient footprint stones, vote-casting words, pledges of allegiance, and whether the stones gave voice and the power to break silence, the power to stand for something out loud. I look at Jürgen and wonder if he still recognises in the stone a device for speaking, like his shamanistic branch, or if it is sure and certain by now that the stone brings people to silence. In this deeply religious place, where prayer is such a regular and natural part of life, I sense that they are well practiced at communicating privately, wordlessly together. I no longer need to hear, no longer want to inquire what goes on in the stone, or hoard other people's standings for myself. I am not sure how I would articulate what goes on during my own. Tonight our communication lies in the shared stone. It speaks where words and uncommon languages get in the way, because weight and place live in all people, because a familiar stone carried to a foreign land can be universally understood just as a foreign stone received by a familiar land can.
So, off the back of that, I don't know if it's fair to ask you to articulate what is it like standing in a footprint stone, in your footprint stone? Is it your footprint stone? Would you say it's your stone? No, sorry, she's drinking.
No, I wouldn't say it was. I referred to it as whilst I was responsible for it, while I was its bearer, I think I referred to it as my stone, but not any longer. No. Time has plans for that stone that are far out with me. Yeah.
So, you complete your journey. You get to the door, to the steps of the cathedral in Norway, in Trondheim.
Somewhat reluctantly.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, the ends of these big transforming journeys are some of the hardest bits of a journey, aren't they? What happens then?
I'm received warmly by the masons of Nidaros Cathedral. I spend 3 weeks in that masonry department.
They make you work?
I choose to work.
Okay.
Yeah, I choose to work the grey soapstone of Nidaros Cathedral, which is a very different stone, a stone with a mineral crystalline structure far different to stones that I've known and used before. So I'm very listing and kind of lost. I feel that I've sort of grown into the space between Mary-Ann's two handles. I feel relieved when my stonemasonry friends put an axe into my hand and say, because in Nidaros the stone requires a different way of working, so they work with axes. Quite a remarkable thing to learn there. Anyway, I get on another boat, much smaller boat this time, going back across the North Sea. And I return to Orkney with my stone. And I think I know what you're getting at.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you do with the stone?
I'm going to be a little cryptic about it.
Okay, yeah, maybe it's
okay.
a plot spoiler.
A bit. I will say I was determined not to betray myself and all that I had learned on that journey. So my decision, it's not a choice, it's the only possible way of ending my journey. And I will also say that one of the most important things I learned was that true portability is only in the heart and the head, and that we choose what we let go of and what we carry with us. So my decision reflects that.
So to continue the crypticness,
Sorry.
have you been back to the place?
No.
Oh.
No, I haven't.
Will you? Would you? Are you going to avoid? Sorry, this is really terrible for everyone who hasn't yet read the book.
Some people have been back to the place,
Ooh.
and sometimes they send me evidence of having been to the place.
Okay.
And in order to send that, they've had to do quite a lot of detective work themselves.
Right.
And I find that really difficult. I find that really difficult when a photograph lands in my inbox.
Unsolicited. Does it feel like an intrusion on something? You, the stone?
It feels ever so slightly like perhaps I didn't communicate how. Maybe it feels like a slight failing of the book that I didn't, that I had hoped people would understand that I wanted the stone to continue on the journey it was set on as a stone before our adventure together, and that the lessons I learned don't require me to know if people have found it. It was the adventure of my life and changed everything for me. And I just want to keep it that way. There was something finished about it, something resolved.
This is the peril of writing a book. It's now out there in the world for everyone else to make of it, make of your journey what they will.
Yeah. And I'm very, very grateful for that, obviously.
Like, damn, I shouldn't have written a book. Okay, so do you feel like the journey served the purpose? Perhaps two different questions. One, the original intent, and two, the intent that grew from the experience itself. Did it do what you needed it to do?
Absolutely. And I didn't know what I needed it to do, but it really, really did. The journey did astonishing work. The journey had astonishing effects. Writing the book had astonishing effects as well.
Interesting. Tell me more.
Well, the journey and the book are two different artworks, I suppose. But writing the book really enhanced what I understood about what I had been doing, because I had to find ways to articulate things that I felt very deeply but hadn't previously had the words for. And to name things, to describe things, actually was a bit of a discovery to, in writing the book, I feel like I was able to, what a muddle. In undertaking the project, I feel I created the conditions in which I could tell myself a story always that I needed to hear. So I think of it as kind of seeking and making real my foundation myths. I learned, I had my carrying capacity restored. I learned that the important things of life that make life worth living, they have a weight and they need to go somewhere. And I am available to carrying the weight of love and being loved again. I also think that devotion is necessary for any action to have power. That's true of making art, but it's also true of any quest, and the quest that this one became. I found it really interesting, and it stayed with me the way that at first people really had their doubts, and then as evidence of my devotion to the stone accrued day by day, I effortfully demonstrated my commitment to moving it. I feel that we became much more worthy of belief and understanding the more that we did that. And for that reason, there were moments of entire comprehension from people later on who stood, sometimes on more than one occasion, or who walked with us. So it's, yeah, that's enough, isn't it? That's enough of a
I think that's
transformative power. Yeah,
that ticks a few boxes for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so Beatrice, we won't talk too much about the stone and its fate. But
Fate.
Is that a bad word?
I don't know.
Oh. Like, no, that makes it sound, more
And it's future.
final.
It's
future,
exciting
there we go.
future.
Future is a better word. Future. Let's talk about your fate. No, for your future. What's next? More journeys, more stones? So this journey was in 2017, so you've had time to percolate, I guess.
Yeah.
Grow, I mean, you were, how old? 26?
Yeah.
So, I mean, time changes things as well, right? So where are you at with your journey of discovery of life and stonemasonry and art and journeying?
Yeah. More journeys, certainly. I think, so that, those myths that I mentioned that I so enjoyed writing. It's been significant for me to discover how important storytelling is to me, and how much sense it makes. So, and I did resist writing a book that was anything less than quite serious and pure non-fiction. And that isn't what the book is, actually. It strays into these imaginative flights. And that was because it wasn't very alive to me until I started writing like that. So the myths that I've written, they protect me from saying more than I want to, but they also expand me and make me more full of possibility and containing multitudes. So the first sea mason and Sisyphus in love with his rock, and the carver of the travelling inscriptions into the stones of the road, and the weight bearers, and the girl that does the petrifying deal with the gods. I feel, although I'm 26 on the journey, it's 2017, I'm inhabited by all of those characters as I go. Now I'm still writing. I think I might be writing fiction, although I wouldn't like to make any promises. And I work with stone still. It's the material with which I have by far the greatest understanding, and it's kind of sacred to me now. But day to day, my work is as an inscriptional letter cutter, and I'm making sculpture about lots of the things that I've hinted at today: stone boats, a stone boat collaboration, and finding words, form, and material that will carry each other and result in strong, truthful, beautiful work, I hope.
I think that's a beautiful moment to open the floor to questions. Please join me in thanking BeatriceSearle. Do we have any questions? Yes.
The stone came from the seashore, I assume. How did that stone come to choose you?
Okay, so
You choosing another stone?
So the question, the stone that you carry came from the seashore. How did you come to choose that stone, or how did the stone choose you?
Yeah, I actually feel that it did choose me more than I chose it. I spend quite a lot of time in the book describing this moment, actually. On the west coast of Orkney, at the shores of, so it's a 390 million year old Devonian siltstone, and it comes from the shallow shores of what once was Lake Orkney. It's very, I don't know if you can really see, but it caught my attention because it's shaped like a traditional Orkney yawl, a clinker-built boat. It's kind of beamy in the side. These stones break naturally along their diagonal stress fractures. And it's also rippled on its surface, so it has these bronze pools. It wasn't the first stone that I chose, but the first stone that I chose was deemed completely unsuitable for a long journey by a geologist friend. So it was Stone Seeking Expedition 2, where this one jumped out at me for its beauty, also because...
So you're literally walking along the shoreline,
yeah,
looking at stones on the stony shore.
Wondering which stone might be suitable for a long journey. But there were a couple of requirements that were non-negotiable. Because people would be standing in it, any rocking or tilting or instability would rid it of its anchoring function. So it needed to be hefty, strong, weighty enough to withstand multiple standings and months of bumping along tracks. And not unfortunately, but those things naturally just contributed to a need for size and weight. And so
And so
It
an
is.
enormous stone.
Yeah.
40 kilos is big, right?
Yes.
Because I was like, 40 kilos isn't that big, especially on a trailer, it'd be fine.
Yeah. Well,
And then I thought a little bit more about that and realised that perhaps not.
on the flat on a trailer, a stone like that, especially centered over the axle, is very ergonomic and not difficult. Those were some quite joyful moments, moments of momentum and easy motion. But going up, or particularly down a hill, where the combined weight of stone and trailer was about 60 kilos, and that's more than me. So 60 kilos of weight was trying to run me down, and 57 kilos of weight, me, was trying to resist that. So I think more might have really made our chances of success. More weight might have made any more weight might have made our chances of success less. I think it's a sweet spot between. It's on the very edge of portability, and that's perfect, poetically, I think.
Thank you. Any more questions? Oh, this way. Yes.
Thank you so much for the amazing talk. I thought it was so interesting that you said the people you encountered kind of tied you into this history of people moving stones. So did you actually encounter the stories of individuals who moved stones, or maybe you encountered people who moved stones as well?
So tell us more about the other people who've carried stones along that path.
Yeah, I don't think it's a very common practice anymore, so I didn't encounter any kind of contemporary tales of that.
Could you tell us a tale from the historical archive or the mythological archive?
Well, in terms of relocated stones, the blue stones from the Preseli Hills in Wales, which are now better known as the Inner Stone Circle of Stonehenge, they were stood up first there, near to where they were quarried. And I believe, as many do, that they were moved to their new location because they had the potential to restore bonds of belonging. So it was important that they moved with the people. So in terms of what is important to move with, we might think, and given the number of people on the move across the world today, and my need to move is not anywhere near as acute as for most of those people, what we choose to carry with us is vitally important. And a stone might seem frivolous. In actual fact, I think there's a precedent in history for moving land, and is immensely transformative. I do also know that though not a moved stone, the white stones of Dovrefell, which are the mountain range that I crossed, have a particular significance. The white stone is a white stone. There's in Revelation, what they stand for, sorry, just to cut a long story short, they stand for forgiveness. At the time of Jesus, the white stone stands for forgiveness. So I think many of the pilgrims who go to Foxtagoo on their way to Nidaros carry with them the white stone because they are recently out of prison. So the place provides a kind of sanctuary for them, a white stone to take with them. And then that's something that they lay down in front of Nidaros Cathedral. It's written in Revelation that you are absolved from sin if given a white stone and given a new name only known to you. So that's a kind of significance of that place for people recently out of prison as well.
Was it ever part of the plan to perhaps leave your stone at Nidaros?
No, because I didn't think of Nidaros as the end point. The return of the stone to Orkney was vitally important, always. Because I was interested in this Roman travelling inscription, proitu et reditu, which means for the journey and return, because the footprints carved for Ridiculous, the Roman god of the return, They were a votive offering also. They were an appeal for protective rights on a journey, but footprints were carved again, or footprints were stood in when travellers were returned safely. So on the Via Appia, there, at the junction of two Roman roads, there are a pair of carved footprints in a church called Santa Maria in Palmas. And that site once hosted a sanctuary to Ridiculous, and it's thought that the footprints that occur there are precisely for that purpose. So the return was, I really wanted to return to Orkney with my stone. That was our destination. The stone was the beginning of the journey, it was the middle, and it was the destination at the end. Yeah.
I think we've got time for one more question. But I'm struggling to... Have I got any hands up at the back? Yes, thank you.
You called it sort of the journey of your life. Does that mean to you, do you see yourself doing something similar or some other kind of journey again? Or do you feel like that's it? You need one and done. You've learned what you needed to learn. There's no more.
I can't see you, so I'm really sorry that I'm not looking at you. It's very dark out there.
Did everyone hear the question? So it's you described this as the journey of your lifetime. Does that mean that it was one and done, no more journeys?
No. No. Well, all the events of my life led to this. So I might have to live another 26 years before I have compiled the curiosities and momentum to... This couldn't be repeated. Of course not. It would be a horrible pastiche. It would be... I still make journeys all the time. Making art is a journey. I think given that it's the mountain festival, it's probably not what you mean. I'm a passionate walker and wild camper and sailor. Will there be another journey in my life that I undertake in order to find answers to questions I don't even know yet? I don't know how I could possibly say. I don't know. I'm absolutely... I hope not. I mean, I hope so.
Oh, really?
I hope
not. I was
I hope
thinking,
so,
like,
and
surely
I hope
you
not.
will.
I'm just open. I don't know. An impossible question. I do think, though I say that my journey is resolved, and that means that I don't have to take it up again or do it again, it does return to me every single moment that I encounter stone, whether it's coursing below me, soaring above me, whether I'm working stone. I'm returned to my journey and what I learned every time I encounter a stone, which is daily. So I am revisiting it. I haven't closed the door out, or I'm not arrogant enough to assume that I have also learned all the lessons that journey had to teach me. Writing the book revealed a lot to me, and each time I do a talk like this, actually, I get even deeper into understanding quite what it was.
Well, many questions, some mystical answers. I commend this book to you. They're on sale in the corner just shortly, and you can have a quick word with Beatrice as well. Please join me in thanking BeatriceSearle. Thank you very much.